And we're live. Hello, everybody. My name is Kenzie Dodds, and I have some questions for Stephen. And actually, I didn't ask you how to pronounce your last name.
It's Bönnemann, but you can
Bönnemann?
totally just, you can pronounce it however you like. It's not very compatible with English languages, so.
Okay, cool. Well, Stephen wrote a really sweet library or tool called Semanticrelease. And I'm the author of several open source libraries, and I'm currently making an Egghead.io series about how to write an open source JavaScript library. And so I'm getting to the point where I want to start teaching about automating your release, and then I find semantic release, and I start thinking, well, maybe my automation of my releases isn't good enough. And so I want to see if semantic release covers my use cases, and yeah. And then if it does, and I like it, then I will, that's what I'll teach. So anyway, that is why we are here. And hopefully this is helpful for other people who may be watching live or will watch later. So great. So Stephen, why don't you give us just a basic overview of what semantic release is, like what problem does it solve, and how does it solve that problem, and what features does it have?
All right. So like I personally started working on automating stuff around releases and maintaining libraries a long time ago. Basically because there are a lot of steps you have to follow and remember, like doing the right tag, having the right commit message format, creating a changelog, all these things. And I got always very frustrated when I have to do it manually, and I forgot steps, and then we had to share this across the team. So the first motivation is to have one release process that doesn't involve any manual interaction from any human. And once we got that in place, I realized that actually it isn't even required to have a human decide what the version number is and what when to release a new version. Because if we follow certain conventions, and in this case it's commit message conventions, the computer can just do that for us. So this is heavily based on conventions. The default conventions it's using are the Angular commit message conventions. They are pretty common, I think, in the Angular community, but they're also spreading farther, where you can attach certain types to your commits, like feature or fix or perf, or you can declare breaking changes. And so semantic release is basically extracting that information whenever you push to the master branch. And then if there's since the last version that got released, if there's a relevant change, which is a fix or a new feature or a breaking change, then it just publishes that version to NPM in that case, creates a changelog from the commit message conventions, uploads that to the GitHub releases, and then automatically creates a tag by that. So not only do you have to, or do you not have to create tags, write commit messages, enter release pages, manage access to the GitHub, to the NPM packages and all that stuff, but also it's just done automatically. You just merge a new feature branch into the master, and then it gets automatically released, which has some really nice implications for Semver as well, because usually there's a lot of emotional attachment to version numbers, where we discuss about whether it's right to do a major version or not, or if something is breaking or not. And it turned out, after having this one thing in place, that the automation makes that even easier, because the emotional part is just erased from the process, which is really nice.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds really cool. And I actually watched your talk that you have linked on the README, and it looks really slick. So maybe a little bit more about how the version is actually determined. So from what I saw in your commit message, if you have, well, actually, so I'll describe what I think the workflow is, and then you can correct me. So
yeah.
When I push up my my changes on some CI server, it will run it'll run my normal build, and then there's like a post action or something. I say, hey, semantic release, go ahead and release this. And semantic release will then take the current state of my code with that commit and run it against the previous commit's tests. And if there's anything breaking, then it says, oh, this is a breaking change. And if my commit message doesn't have an indicator that this commit was supposed to be a breaking change, then I'll get an error of some kind. But then if my commit message does say, hey, there's a breaking change, then it'll just bump the major version and release that. But then for the minor and patch, I'm not sure how it determines whether to do minor or patch. Do I have to myself say whether it's a minor or a patch?
Okay, so the thing you described is actually a semantic release plugin. And there are certain ways how you can verify releases. And maybe we can just discuss this after this one, and then I can just explain how it's doing it. So it's the release itself is only determined by the commit message. So if you push to the master branch, then the CI server picks it up. And if the tests are passing, then the semantic release command is running. And it's looking at the NPM registry in this case and determines the last version that was published. And then there's also the Git hash attached to that in the registry. And so it then looks at all the commits that have happened since that commit. And then it parses the commit messages and just uses the highest type of version it can find. So if it can find only patches, it will release a new patch version. If it can't find anything, it will release nothing. Or if it finds a breaking change description, then we'll just release a new major version. So that's how it works if you have no plugins installed at all.
Okay.
And then,
so in my commit message, I say this is a patch or this is a minor.
Yeah, right. So you can use by default, you can use the Angular commit message convention. So for a patch, that would be fix, colon, and then the message, or fix, and then an optional scope, and then the message. But you can also define your own commit message style if you want to. Yeah.
Okay. And have you heard of Commitizen? It's this library by Jim Cummins, or not a library, it's a tool that will take you through a workflow for building your commit message, and it's totally pluggable. So there's one by that's out there for the Angular commit message, and so you, instead of git commit, you say git cz, and then it'll prompt you for each thing. Have you seen that before?
I haven't seen it, but it sounds perfect, like the perfect companion to Semanticrelease. That's very nice. I didn't get the name quite right, I guess, but you can send the link. Yeah,
I'll add that to the Hangout
nice.
event so other people can see that too.
Nice. So the next thing that's actually very interesting, and that only came up after having semantic release in place, are the verifications I already talked about. And so the one that you mentioned is one verification. So there are two verification steps. The first one is a static analysis of your repository. So for example, you could create a plugin that looks at the test coverage that was generated and just aborts a release if the test coverage isn't below a certain threshold. So if you say my library shouldn't be released below 95% coverage, then just aborts the release, nothing happens. You could do the same with, for example, the node security project. So you abort the release whenever your dependencies have a vulnerability in their dependencies, or if you don't want to have the releases so often, you could, for example, write a plugin that aborts the release if not at least a week has passed since the last release or something. You could really define it on your own. So that is the static verification, and then there is the dynamic verification, where it analyzes the commits and passes you the type of release it would release. So then you have, okay, this would be a patch or a new minor or new breaking change, and then you can verify based on that. And so the thing you mentioned is a plugin called Cracks, which is supposed to detect breaking changes. So the assumption is that you have a test suite that's only running on the API. It doesn't test any implementation details. And then it checks out the test folder or any test files you specify from the last version, and then runs the old test suite against your current code, and that should still run. If it doesn't, then that's a breaking change. And then it just aborts the release, and you can only release that by either fixing the breakage or declaring the breaking change in your commit messages. And once you have that, it doesn't run the verification because it's a major release already. And there are other techniques to detect breaking changes. Another approach is don't break, which is another module on NPM, where it runs the test suites of your dependents. And so you can test if your dependents would break with the new version, which is pretty nice. Then there's even a third way where you can, if you have JS doc style code comments, it just diffs the public API. And if there's a change or breaking change, you could abort the release as well. So you have these, on top of the basic commit message based thing, you can basically define an entire set of heuristics so that you have another level of automation around releases.
Wow, that's really cool. Did you build all of that? Or do you have
it's not done. So there's the breaking change plugin called Cracks that's done already, and the rest is basically wiring up APIs, but you probably know how it is. You don't always have the time to just do it, but yeah, it's wiring up APIs. And if anyone wants to jump in, I'm very happy to help them build these plugins.
Yeah, that's super cool. Cool. All right. So oh yeah. So it works with CI services. So a couple questions about that. The example that you had, I think, was using Travis in your talk. Does it, like, my guess is it doesn't really matter what CI service it is. You just have to set up your CI to have the right environment variables and things. So what do I need to do to set up a CI service?
Yeah, so again, the default is, so it works with Travis. And the reason why it just doesn't work with any CI service out of the box is that like it doesn't automatically have to be a build that's also releasable. So there is a plugin for Travis, which is actually just the static verification type that verifies that it's on the right branch. So by default, it's the master branch, but you can define other branches as well. Then it defines that it's not a pull request. It verifies that it's not happening on a tag or on any other branch than master. And so that's just some like Travis CI specific verifications, and you can basically do that for every CI service. And it's essentially just checking a few environment variables, and that's all it takes to run it on an arbitrary CI server. Okay,
so that would just be like in the form of a bash script or something to know whether to run semantic release.
You can do a bash script entirely before semantic release, but there's actually a plugin step, and then you can just run some JavaScript if else on the process env variables. That's what the Travis thing is doing. So what I tried with semantic release is that all the plugin steps have certain defaults, and all these defaults are implemented in their own repository. So you essentially have reference implementation. So there's one for Travis, and you could just go in and get the default Travis verification plugin, fork it, and then you just have all you need, like the whole, I don't know, the build and the function signature and everything is there. You just need to change a few lines, basically. That's what I tried with the core plugins.
Okay, cool. Sounds simple enough. But then for the actual publishing of the module, what do I need to do? Do I need to give or create an NPM user that can publish my module, or do I need to give set an environment variable for the my NPM token so that the CI server can publish as me?
Yeah. So there's a CLI that helps you to set up semantic release very, very easily. So you'd have to expose a GitHub token to the CI environment so you can create the release page and the tags, and you have to expose an NPM token so it can actually publish to the registry. And so there's a CLI where you just run one command inside of your repository, and then it just asks you for your username and you log in, basically. And then it uploads these variables encrypted to Travis CI in this case, but you can just do that for any other CI service as well. And then it's basically just one command, and it does a lot of ugly stuff behind the scenes for you, like encrypting stuff and uploading it and making it available. And we're about to get a feature landed that's password caching in the keychain. So once you have it set up once, you just have to confirm, because it's taking all the auth stuff from the keychain. So it's even easier to just one command and then you confirm stuff. And you can use your private npm account or a GitHub account, but if you want to have a bot, you can just use a bot account. That's totally up to you. It works with everything.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. So with that CI or with that CLI, it like you have it automatically uploading to Travis. But if I have a different service, you mentioned that like I could add logic for it uploading to a different service. What if I just want to have it output the token to me and like not have it upload? Is that like built in, or do I need to?
Yeah, so it asks you what CI service you're using, and the only ones that are currently supported are Travis CI, Travis Pro, and Travis Enterprise, which is basically all Travis. And then there's an other option where it just logs the tokens out, and then you have to upload them manually. But if someone wants to do that for any other CI service, we can just merge it into the CI, and then you can just choose the service you're using. So that's just a matter of contributions and what we are using for the project itself. So that's just what makes sense there.
Totally. Yep, that makes sense. I will probably, yeah, that's good to know. Let me see. Oh, so what about contributors? So with the kind of having a stricter or a more strict commit convention, if I have somebody like maybe it's a first time ever contribution, they don't know Git very well, whatever. So like, do they have to make sure that they follow my commit conventions? And if they have a pull request where a commit doesn't follow the conventions, do I need to say, hey, could you like recommit that and force push?
Right. So that's a question I get a lot, and it's certainly a problem. It's another barrier to entry, basically, because new committers have to know the conventions and have to use them. And so I think that even without semantic release, it makes a lot of sense to have certain conventions around commits, so they're actually meaningful, so that you can generate a changelog, and you get a lot of stuff for free with semantic release. So I think it makes sense. And then it's only the question how you make that accessible for new contributors. And I think that's also what we are doing, is we just, if it's a minor thing, I just let them know, like, look, you can just force push. It's a branch, like force pushing there is totally okay, and you can change the commit message like this. Here are the basic rules. Maybe I can even write down for them what the commit message should look like. And another thing that I'm trying to do is, if the code is perfectly fine and someone just didn't get the commit message style quite right, I just clone the branch locally, and then I rebase it. So I try to not change the meaning of the commit. I just make it adhere to the conventions, and then I push it to the master myself. So it's still their commit, it's still their message, it's still their code, but I just make it adhere to the conventions. And then I put up a comment like, okay, very nice, thank you for your contribution, but we're using these conventions, and I just did it for you so we can land your feature or fix earlier, so it doesn't block anything. I hope you're okay with that, and here is it for the future. And I think that's just a very, it's a barrier, it's a cost, but I think it's very worth it for what you're getting.
Cool. Yeah, that seems reasonable. I'm not super good with Git hooks, but I imagine that there'd be a way to make a good Git hook that would say, hey, your commit message is wrong, and like give an explanation of how to do that.
That thing already exists, yeah.
Oh, really? Do you have a link to that, or where I could find like a?
I think it's part of the Angular repository itself. There's just a file in there that's just doing it, and then there are instructions how to make it a commit hook. I can send you the instructions or the file later on. Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. So one thing, one of my libraries, I for like the home page, pretty much the whole website is just a bunch of examples using JS bin. And with JSBin, I just use rawget, which, have you heard of rawget?
No.
So rawget is really cool. It will serve up files from GitHub using the proper content type.
A rawget? No. Okay, I get it. Yeah, I see. Sorry. Yeah.
So anyway, so I create a JSBin that uses rawget to point to master of my distributable file, which is using UMD. So like in the case of JSBin, it'll just export itself as a global. And so then I can have all these examples. So with Semanticrelease, how does that deal with like the distributable file? Like can I like currently when I release, I run the build and it commits to a dist folder or it updates the dist directory, and then I release, and the dist is what people will require or like get into their projects. And so with Semanticrelease, actually doing the release, like do I still run the build myself, or does Semanticrelease run the build and push that out? And then in that case, do I still have access to the distributable file in my GitHub, like in my Git?
Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing that doesn't work that way, because how Semanticrelease does it is in general, you can just define a pre-published script, for example, where you compile your stuff and then you output it in the distribution folder. And then that's part of the bundle that is going to get uploaded to NPM. So at the time, the stuff that lies in the directory is just all going to be part of the package. And there's an NPM ignore file, which you can configure so the actual NPM package contains exactly what you want. And then that all gets bundled up and put into the tarball, which is then on the NPM registry, which means that no generated files are in the repository. And I see why you want to have that for your rawget stuff, but I don't think that generated files and build artifacts in repository are a good thing in the first place. So one thing or one idea I see to work around this is you could just, after Semanticrelease has published, you can just run another script then. And then if you want to make the distribution folder accessible, you're already having the Git token available in the CI environment. So you could just spin up a little script that just pushes the files you've generated onto another branch, like GitHub Pages or distribution branch, and then you have the files available there. But it's not possible to get the build files back into the repository, and I would almost say it's on purpose, because I don't think it's a good thing to do. And I have done it a lot myself, but I always hated it, because it makes diffs ugly. You have a lot of additions and deletions, and there's so much more data you have to download when you clone the repository. So I really try to keep my repositories clean of that, and also encourage others to not do that. I think there are other ways that I described to just get them somewhere. Like you already have them on registry, and then you can just put them on another branch, or put them on S3 with a predictable file name or something like that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm definitely aware of the drawbacks of having the dist, and so like I have to make sure that my commits for that build are like isolated. This is a build commit. Don't even look at it, because the diff is like worthless.
And that's another thing that Semanticrelease does differently. For every other package you see, there will be a version number in the package JSON. And the NPM documentation says like there are two fields that are required, which is the name and the version. And if you publish your stuff with Semanticrelease, you don't need the version in the package JSON in the repository, because the version is generated in the CI. So you don't have the version actually in your repository, which I think is a cool thing, because it's just another build artifact, and you have Git tags, so you can still see which commit belongs to which version, but you don't have these generated things in your repository, which are going to be changed all the time, which are error prone and all that stuff. So that's just all up to the computers, and we don't have to mess with that.
Cool. That's actually, I kind of like that. I just had an interesting thought. So like, what if, like on GitHub, you go to a tag and it will show you the README in that root directory, right?
Right now.
So what if you made that README for a specific tag just be the change?
Sorry, can you repeat that? The connection was just very, very bad.
Oh, okay. Hopefully, yeah, it's kind of bad for you too. But I was just thinking that like for when you're releasing, if you like generate the README to be actually like just the change log, that would be kind of interesting. But anyway, that's just kind of a thought.
So that's why I used to have a changelog markdown file in my repository, but I just put it on the GitHub releases page exclusively for the very same reason. It's a build artifact, and if you have it inside of the repository, you cannot change the changelog for a certain version, only like creating a new release, a new commit. And if you have it on a site like GitHub releases, you can edit it afterwards, which means you could even use changelog that is generated just as a template. So you get a new version, then you have the list of commits and all that stuff, and then you just edit, hit the edit button and have all the details already in there, and you can just focus on writing what's important about this release, or you thank certain contributors. So that's what I do. I just have this template, and if I think something is very notable or important, I can edit the changelog for a certain version after I published it, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Or if there's a typo, or if I'm not, if some commit had a typo or got something wrong, you can still edit the actual changelog, which is nice.
Yeah, that is nice. Yeah, I'm liking this. Okay, so let me just make sure. Oh yeah, so beta releases, how do those work?
All right, I was hoping this question is coming because I am very excited about this one. So what we used to do before is creating version numbers with a certain beta flag at the end, or alpha or whatever. And with a semantic release, we're doing a little shift basically, because if you attach a beta or alpha tag to the version, you're mixing things up, because you're at one time trying to communicate the breakage of the public API using version numbers, but at the same time you're trying to communicate stability. And there's another concept of getting your versions out, at least for NPM, where you completely separate the version numbers and the stability. So if you publish a new version, it gets a tag attached to it, an NPM tag attached to it, which is the latest tag. If someone installs your library, they automatically get the latest. They don't get the version with the highest number, they get the one with the latest tag attached to that. And so what you can do is you just, the versions that are published automatically from your master branch don't get the latest tag, they get something like a next tag. And so the new versions are always on the next tag. And if you have some early adopters or people you ask for feedback, they can just use the usual keychain. They can just use actual version numbers. The version number still communicates if things are breaking to get your new version. But the mainstream users won't get it because it's not on the stable or latest branch yet. And then if you find a bug in something, or that you haven't declared a breaking change or something, you can just release the next version. And only if you're confident with that version, you move the latest tag over to that version, and then it goes out to everyone, which is essentially a beta workflow. And you can do more channels than one. You can do, it's essentially like Chrome does. Like you have beta and canary and stable. And that's the same thing you can do with semantic release. And so there is a config that you can set, and then you have a different tag than latest, basically. And that's how you do beta releases.
Okay, so maybe this is me being too emotional about my release numbers, but I'm just wondering if, so let's say that my library is at 6.0, or hey, let's make it realistic. Let's say my library is at like 25.0.0, and I say, okay, I want to do a beta, and that's going to be a breaking change, so it'll be now 26, but latest is still pointing to 25. But then I realize that there's a problem in my beta, and I want to make another breaking change, so that's going to be 27, and then there's a problem in that. And so now my beta or my next is 28. And so then I decide, scrap it all, I don't want it, or maybe I do, but I want it a little bit different. Now my latest goes from 25 all the way up to like 29. And the people who are just using it normally are like, holy moly, what on earth just happened? Like, I'm like 6 versions behind. So is that me just being too emotional about release numbers, or is like, I just think that, like, and also with, well, yeah, maybe that is being too emotional. Is there an answer to that, or is that just?
Yeah, so you can, if you have these different channels, you can still keep on releasing on both channels or all channels. So you could still publish on Next, but also put patches out on the stable branch. And I agree, if you have a breaking change in the next channel, which is then an increment of 1 from the major version of your stable branch, and then you want to do a breaking change there, then you're kind of in a bad situation. But like, I think you should, if the stable branch is still going to be maintained in a matter that it's still getting breaking changes, which I think is unusual, then you can just experiment with version numbers. So let's say you're on version 12 with your stable channel, then you can just start doing the next channel on 20 if you want to, and then you can just publish on multiple tracks. So I agree, if you have version 12 and then you have the next channel on 13, and then you have to break something on master, then you're kind of in a, yeah, you have a problem. But I think most of the time, the main development moves from the stable thing to the next thing. And then the only thing that you're only going to port back there is security fixes and patches that you found during development that also apply to the old version. But if you have that kind of thing, then maybe just skip 10 versions ahead, something like that. You can still be creative with that, and then it's still consistent.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. So what are your feelings on just adding the -beta.0 and like incrementing that last number for the beta release?
I think, as I said, it's mixing 2 things up, because you're using the version number to communicate both the API breakage and the stability. And I also think it's a tool to hide multiple breakages away. Like you're trying to release a new version, and then you want to break all the things, and you're scared of ending up with a super high breaking, a major number, because you would have to increment it all the time. And so you just hide it behind this beta thing, and then you have 5 or 6 beta versions, and then people's stuff breaks because they just get the new beta version, and then there's a breaking change in it. But you know, like, it's a beta version, what did you expect? And then it's some weird trick to hide away that you're still breaking stuff. And I think it's not worth it's not worth giving up the automatic communication about breakages, because I don't think there's a problem if you're on stable 4, for example, and you start doing a new edge kind of release on 5, and then it only moves to stable on version 10. What's the problem with that? I don't think there is any. And the people who are using your unstable stuff can still benefit from Semver. So you can have more people that are using your unstable stuff already, because it just doesn't break when they get the new beta version, or at least they can see from the version number. And I think it's not worth giving that up. So it's just a weird hack, these version flags. Cool. I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's convinced me. I think what I'll probably end up doing then is all my beta stuff will be like at version 2000, and like, because yeah, who knows, this library could live on for a really long time. So,
yeah. I think it's a place where we can experiment. Like, would it make sense to just for every new beta thing to just move ahead to the next I don't know how to say it in English, like where you go to the next 10th, like if you're at 15, just go to 20. if you're at 22 or something, just go to 30. So for every new like real major thing, you just skip 10 ahead. And then you have some room for breakages in the old stuff, and people also have a visual indication of a new, like really major version, not in the sense of breaking, but major new stuff. Then they see, okay, it's a new increment by 10, so maybe it's a completely different thing. And I think we have to find some new conventions and experiment with that stuff, because right now there's this weird rule that version numbers have to be one after another, and have to be chronologically. And I don't think it matters at all. Like with Node.js, which is 0.10, 0.12, and now the next version is 4. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care. It just makes sense. And we don't have to stick to versions so tightly and be so weird about them, because it really breaks Semver, and I don't think it's worth giving that up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's an interesting idea. Because then you get the benefit of the emotional side of versioning by saying, hey, yeah, every single time I go up to 10 to the next 10, that's like what you would consider a major version. Yeah. That's interesting. I'll have to give that.
And it's still in the spec of Semver that you can do. You can increase whatever version you want at any point. So even if you haven't broken something, but you think it's the new major thing and everyone should be excited about it and writing blog posts about it, then you can just arbitrarily bump to the next 10 or 20 or something. You can still do that. That would be another idea. You can increment by 100. I don't know. I don't care. It's just worth exploring, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So one concern that I have had about having frequent major release changes, or one concern that I've heard, is like, let's take Angular, for example. They're a perfect example of totally breaking Semver. And so, let's forget about Angular 2, because that's like a totally different thing altogether. With Angular 1, this should probably be at around Angular like 10 or something by now, with all the breaking changes, probably more, probably higher. Pretty much every minor release has a slew of breaking changes, and even I think some patch releases too. So there's something to be said about community segmentation when like you say, well, what version are you on? Like every single time somebody's asking a question, oh, you're on version like 8 or you're on version 3. I don't even know what's happened between now and then. Maybe this is totally invalid, because actually following Semver would make that even easier. I don't know. Like maybe just more generally, does having these more frequent, like actually following Semver, does this have a negative impact on the community or a positive impact, do you think?
I don't think it has neither of them. It's there are very popular projects like Browserify or Harpy or IO.js, for example, and they have new major releases all the time. And I don't think that people are any more upset or whatever because of breakages, but at least they can know before, which is at least better than having the new minor release and then stuff still breaks. So I think one big problem with major versions is that it blocks getting them out to your users, because people use the version ranges, for example, and then people don't get them automatically, and they just have to go in manually, bump the version, do their testing. And so if you do major changes frequently, people don't get you new versions. But that's also kind of the point, because it would break their projects. And so I think it's a fair trade-off, because if you're very strict about Semver, then at least the other versions can go out automatically, right? Because if you don't follow Semver, you have to manually update every single version, which is way worse than just updating the major versions. And if you have 2 or 3 of them a year, then that's 2 or 3 versions a year. But if you have, for example, Angular, I would never use version ranges for Angular, because they just break whenever they want. So it's, in fact, there's every version even though it looks like it's very stable. Oh, I'm sorry. I have no idea what that was coming from. While at Hapi or Browserify, you at least know before, and you can use the ranges for the minor and patch releases, which is better than having no ranges at all.
Totally, yeah. I'm totally sold. I think Semper is something that everybody should be following, even if you have many breaking changes. But I think that like reducing the number of breaking changes and like having it be incremental, like deprecations are totally fine in a minor release. Like you can say, yeah, the old API still works, but you're going to get a warning in your console. Like that's totally fine. People don't mind.
That's very nice. Yeah, that's what Ember does, where it just adds warnings, and that's what I try to do as well. That I just log a warning to the console, and then you can just accumulate stuff and get it out in one major release. So I'm not saying that semantic release or all this automation or losing the fear of the major version, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan ahead. Like if you know how the architecture is going to be laid out and where to make changes, you can still try and group it together and work on branches and not work the pull request you're getting against the branch that's going to be released, but work on one branch and then accumulate more breaking changes and then get them out, or have some kind of schedule where you do a release every week or something like that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan ahead. That's still what you should do. What makes you a responsible library author.
Cool. Yeah. So I think this conversation has been really helpful, because my first impression of semantic release was that it was very opinionated, but it seems like it's opinionated in all the good reasons or all the good ways, but extremely flexible for how you want to do things as well, which I think is super cool. So in the Hangouts, we have the Q&A app turned on, and Louis Cowper has asked a couple questions. Oh, do you know him?
I know him, yeah.
Okay, so he's got a couple questions. Maybe he's asked these before. So the first is there anything stopping one using semantic release on a non-JS project? I could see it being useful in software written in other languages.
So it's very tightly coupled to NPM at the moment. We just landed a pull request where you can decouple it from NPM, because the logic that determines the last release that happened was bound to NPM, and now that's just a plugin. So you could replace that with Git tags, or you could replace that with any other registry, like let's say gems or something. And then you, of course, have to add the Node.js dependency to your Ruby project, which is maybe not what you want to do. And so for me, semantic release is the concept, and the semantic release repository that exists right now is more like semantic release NPM for me. It's the implementation of a concept and conventions for the Node and JavaScript ecosystem, but it would make total sense to just implement it for other registries or package managers. And there are actually people starting to do that. So there's one for Python, there's one for Gitflow, Gradle. I don't even know what these things are, but people are building semantic release for them. So that's pretty cool.
That's sweet. Cool. And then the other question is, oh, and my lights go out sometimes. Wake up. That's super annoying. So the other question is, what was the biggest problem you had in automating the release process? Was one part between GitHub, Travis, CI, and NPM by default more difficult or resistant to work with you?
So GitHub was pretty easy because I'm not even touching GitHub that much. It's pretty much only working with the CIs and the real-time stuff, and CIs picking it up is all done already. I'm not touching GitHub except for creating that one release, which is an API call. So that was easy. Travis is is a very nice tool. I love the people that are working on it, and I had no problems. It's very flexible. I want to have some kind of integration tests, and they're running locally, and I'm still struggling to get the CouchDB running because I'm running the actual NPM registry inside of my CI, which is a Couch app. And so I'm currently struggling to get the Couch thing working on Travis, so to have a full integration run. So that's one problem, but that's not really a problem with the integration. And then NPM was kind of a problem at the beginning because I was just going in very naively, and I didn't know that much about NPM, so it was just using child process exec and was running some NPM commands, and it was all very fragile and broke all the time, and I had some wrong assumptions about how life cycle hooks ran, and so there were some hiccups at the beginning. And then this summer I had the privilege to go to NodeConf adventure in San Francisco, and I talked to Forrest, who is the CLI team lead, and we had a very nice conversation, and that saved me so much time because he told me about all the internals, also Benjamin Coe and Kat from NPM. They told me some internals that I could have found them myself, but if someone just gives them or presents them to you, things are way easier. And so I'm now using
video chat.
yeah, and so I'm using a lot of the tools that NPM is using itself. So I'm using the NPM registry client, I'm using the logger, and I know how NPM works now, and so the integration is very smooth and very reliable now, which it wasn't in the beginning, which is maybe 50-50, the fault of documentation and my fault, but it's also who wants to integrate so tightly with NPM. So it's a thing I had to work through, and I think it's worth it. So it's cool, and it should be doable for any registry in any language and ecosystem. So that's cool.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I know that you've made me really excited about this Semanticrelease. I'm definitely going to move my projects over to it. So, and I'll definitely teach about it in my Egghead lesson series.
Nice.
So, and get this, I want to make my CI a little smoother, and so I'm probably going to switch from Snap for my libraries, from Snap CI to Travis. For applications, I still recommend Snap CI. It's super awesome, but
Okay.
yeah, the integration that you have with Travis sounds just too good. So I'm going back there. So anyway, yeah, thank you for giving me some time. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about Semanticrelease that I didn't ask about?
I don't know. Maybe if people want to contribute or look at the source code, we have this organization on GitHub, which is just Semanticrelease. There are all the repositories there. You have a GitHub chat room, and I'm very happy to help people if they want to contribute, because I don't have the time necessarily to implement all the things that I wanted to do, but they're not necessarily hard to do, or you would have to be very into the code base. It's just that you need to step in and do them. And so I saw your first timers only blog post, and that's something I want to start for Semanticrelease as well. There are some low-hanging fruits. I would love to get more people in and contribute and add their ideas and get some plugins going and all that stuff. That would be really nice.
Awesome. Well, you may see me as a contributor when I hit some edge cases or something that I'm trying to do. So yeah, that's cool. Last question, or maybe second to last question. So how do, for all of the plugins, are all plugins part of the Semanticrelease org, or is there like an NPM keyword or tag that I can find Semanticrelease plugins?
I'm trying to add the Semanticrelease keyword to all of them, but they're also all in the Semanticrelease organization. And I don't think there are so many plugins out there yet, but I definitely want to change that. And yeah, getting the word out will certainly yield more plugins, and I'm very excited to see them.
Great, cool. And then if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, what's the best way to do that?
It's certainly Twitter. So it's my last name without the umlaut, which is hard to type because it contains 4N, but you can put the link maybe into the description of this video. Or okay, here's the thing: Google Hangouts is actually pretty cool. You can see the Twitter handle, and then, as I said, there's the GitHub chat room for Semanticrelease, and I'm trying to be very responsive in these channels and also the issues. So you can certainly reach me there.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you very much for giving me some of your time, and I look forward to chatting with you some more. And I'm also still looking forward to your response about my why Semver ranges are literally the worst posts.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. It will probably take me some more time because I want to present the working solution for that. Sorry, I am totally teasing here, but
yes.
There's another way. Let's put it that way, and I'm working on it. So let's see how it turns out.
Cool. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. I've had a lot of opposition to the idea, and like people keep saying, why don't you just shrink wrap? And I'm like, I mentioned shrink wrap. Like, it's great, but it didn't work very well for me, so give it a shot. Anyway.
Yeah, there's one thing that I can say right now. The main thing that I was missing in the blog post is the fundamental differentiation between modules and libraries and applications, because it's a totally different thing if you're writing a library or an application. I'm totally with you that you should maybe lock in stuff or use shrink wrap if you're writing an application, because that could break your deploys all the time. But if you're a library author and you lock in dependencies, that's another part of dependency hell, essentially. So the thing that's visible to us in dependency hell is that we get the breakages too often, which is called dependency promiscuity. But the other side of dependency hell is dependency lock. And if you're, as a library author, lock in some versions unnecessarily, you're blocking them for the people who are consuming your library, and there's no way for them to change them. If you're having ranges, they can still lock them in using shrink wrap. But if you're, as a library author, are locking them in, you're locking them in for every library or application that's depending on yours, and the libraries that are depending on the others, and so on and so on. And you're keeping bug fixes and security fixes away from people by that. And generally, I think libraries should have ranges, so that the application authors still have control over it. So they can either shrink wrap it or have the ranges. So the end user of the package is essentially in control of which versions he gets, but the library should just allow it to flow through.
Okay, yeah, that actually, that's very a compelling case. I think you convinced me on that. I think what I need to do is I need to try npm shrink wrap again on my application and just see if I can.
It's going to change a bit with npm 3, because right now, if you're having a shrink wrapped application and you install a new package, it doesn't automatically run shrink wrap. And so if you're committing, then the other people on your team won't get the new version because you forgot to run shrink wrap and all the kind of stuff. But with npm 3, it's just going to run automatically. So whenever you install a new version, it's going to rewrite the shrink wrap. So that's going to change, which makes it better. So I don't say shrink wrap is perfect, but I think it's going to be, it's going to get way better with npm 3. And then,
well, and then also npm 3 will make your node modules more flat, right?
Yeah.
So that,
and it can't do that if every library locks in the dependencies, the deduplication doesn't work very well. So that's another.
I should probably update my blog post. So, cool. Well, hey, yeah, thank you very much. I gotta rush off to stand up. This took a lot longer than I expected, but got a lot of really good information. I hope hope people find this useful.
Cool. Dan, thank you very much for hosting this and inviting me. So I hope we see each other sometime soon. Maybe online, maybe at a conference. That would be nice.
Yeah, sweet. Be good.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.